Welcome to our panel on artificial intelligence. We've got a great panel here, as you can see. We've heard a lot about AI this morning, and today our goal is going to be to hear from the panelists on how AI is transforming the federal government to be more efficient, more effective, and hopefully more secure. So, Dr. Parker, we'd like to start with you. You're at the Office of Science and Technology Policy at the White House. And maybe you could start talking about your role and how the OSTP is helping further federal government initiatives around AI.
Sure. So good morning, everyone. I am Assistant Director for Artificial Intelligence in the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy. What that means is that I oversee all of our White House activities as it relates in particular to promoting the nation's advantage in artificial intelligence. And so at OSTP, we have a strong role for interagency coordination and cooperation as it relates to science and technology. So certainly in the area of artificial intelligence, that plays a role as well. And so I do oversee a number of interagency coordination activities in artificial intelligence to ensure that we are all moving ahead together as it relates to artificial intelligence.
Great, excellent. Now, the president earlier this year issued a directive, an executive order on AI. Can you talk a little bit about that executive order and what it means to the federal government?
Yes, so February 11th it was, President Trump signed the executive order on artificial intelligence, and that established the American AI Initiative. That initiative is a multi-pronged, all-of-government approach to help us make sure that we maintain our leadership in AI, and also that we use it in a way that's beneficial for the American people and it's consistent with our values. It covers a wide range of areas that are important for the federal government to act in, particularly as it relates to the entire life cycle of artificial intelligence. So at the beginning of the life cycle of AI, you start with R&D, research and development. And so there are actions there for the agencies to prioritize their initiatives and actions and activities as it relates to artificial intelligence. It also recognizes that AI is not just about algorithms, but it's also about the infrastructure and the data that's so important. So there are actions in the executive order directing agencies to make more data more available and also to provide more cyber infrastructure resources as well. It covers many other actions such as technical standards for AI, AI governance, education and workforce issues, and also international engagement. So all of those actions are important roles that the federal government needs to be acting in conjunction with industry, academia, civil society, and our international allies in order to help us all move together collectively. One of my roles now is to help us at the federal level to execute on the executive order and to implement it. So I'm currently overseeing these activities, again, across the interagency to make sure that we all deliver on what has been asked for by the president in the executive order.
How do you see the agencies executing on this? My understanding is that there's no funding associated with the order directly. So how do you see this executing going forward?
By the nature of executive orders, of course, you don't have funding that it's associated there. A lot of the actions are actions that the agencies in some sense have the expertise for. For instance, in the actions on creating a plan for the federal engagement and the development of AI technical standards, it puts NIST in charge of that. And that's what NIST does. And so they have a full-fledged process for engaging that area. They had a workshop last week. They had a request for information that came out. So the agencies, through the interagency coordination process, which already exists and which is already robust, through the National Science and Technology Council, which is part of the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy. And then underneath that is through the Networking and Information Technology Research and Development Subcommittee, or NITRD Subcommittee. So we have mechanisms in place to bring the right people together from the agencies to help us collectively work together on these areas.
Okay, great. Mr. Finch Fulton from the Department of Transportation. Finch, maybe you can talk a little about what your team's doing around AI, artificial intelligence, and maybe some of the new innovative things going on at the department.
Absolutely. So to answer the first question, I'm much older than I look. I look like a child with this group. I think I look even worse. But it is interesting taking the guidance that we get from the White House and from OMB on executing around artificial intelligence. Because one of the basic orders is we need to focus on things like basic research. Well, Department of Energy has fantastic basic research programs. Department of Transportation doesn't really have that. That's not what we're set up to do. So we focus more on the applied research and tech transfer avenues there. And for us, what that means is with applied research, it's figuring out how to do our own operations better for things like safety. So you have operations that we've set up in demonstrations where you video record people and vehicles reacting to road signs, reacting to different technologies. We're talking thousands of hours of recordings that we use machine learning and AI to get trends on that, to see how people react to different technologies and distractions on the roadsides, which is critically important to proving the safety of things like automated vehicles. The FAA uses AI to help understand weather patterns and predict what weather is going to do to their types of operations. And if you look at things like Federal Railroad Administration, they use things like drones and AI to get anomalies in the rail systems, because you have thousands and thousands of miles of rail across the country. We have to figure out how to use these technologies to improve safety throughout our entire transportation system. But probably the biggest impact we have is enabling these technologies to exist, because if DOT took no further actions, we would have no world where automated vehicles could exist, where drones could operate. And these are technologies that dramatically improve safety, that dramatically improve efficiency, that can have an incredible economic benefit. But if we do nothing, if we do not figure out how to set up safe and permissive rules for things like drone operations or automated vehicles, we lose all of this. And so we have an active role in allowing the technology to flourish, and then figuring out how we can transfer some of the process and technologies that we create ourselves into the world. So it's much more on the farthest end instead of at the beginning of the process for Department of Transportation.
Right, right. So I'm sure many people are thinking, when do we get one? When do I get my autonomous vehicle? What's the timeline? What does it look like?
Well, it is incredibly interesting because some people argue that they have them today, but that is not the case. Every vehicle that you can buy or operate today requires a human to be in control, right? You're supervising systems that may help improve safety, and we actually expect that the systems that exist today will reduce the number of fatalities by 5,000, I should say. Studies have shown that it could reduce the number of fatalities on the road by 5,000 once these technologies are integrated into the fleet around 2025. So that's lives saved a year. There are over 37,000 fatalities caused on American roadways each year, most of them caused by drunk driving, by speeding, by people not wearing their seatbelts, and distracted driving. If you remove the human error out of the equation, or at least find ways to reduce it, you can dramatically improve safety. And safety is our top priority, which is why this is critical in enabling these technologies. So that's where our focus is, and why we're so focused on this.
So with that,
So soon, hopefully, as the technologies develop, I realize I didn't answer your question at all.
I'm still
I've
waiting.
been in the government for 2.5 years now, and I've already figured out that
It's a
trick.
great pivot.
Lower levels of automated driving systems are available today, but true automated vehicles are a few years out. The technology doesn't exist yet, and we're having to update the rules alongside the technological development. And we don't know how long it'll take them, but we want to be ready to work with them.
Excellent, excellent. So you mentioned safety as a primary concern. Any thoughts around cybersecurity and the risk that that poses to autonomous vehicles?
Absolutely. So we have both internal government processes working with NIST, who sets the standard for cybersecurity, that we look at enterprise-wide in terms of DOT assets and the assets around the country, but also being able to push that out. And one of the mechanisms we're talking specifically about vehicles and automated vehicles is the Auto ISAC, Information Sharing Center. It's a protocol where private sector entities come together and work together to take on these existential cybersecurity questions that can sink the world of automated vehicles, or that can sink any of these innovative technologies. Because if you can't prove the safety and security and privacy of these systems, people will reject them, and again, we lose the whole ballgame. So it is critically important working with our interagency partners and ensuring that industry are adopting these standards as quickly as they can be developed and understood.
Great, thank you. Dr. Kuznetsov, Department of Energy, can you tell us what's happening down at the Department of Energy around artificial intelligence?
Oh, absolutely. It's really an interesting time. I want to thank certainly Fed Talks for this opportunity. And I got to say that the support from the White House, from Michael Kratsios, from Lynn, the team that pushed the executive order, has been really important in forming kind of the top cover for agencies to act. You know, at the Department of Energy, our Secretary, Rick Perry, is strongly behind AI. He has seen the value and the importance to our missions, and he is really leaning forward into this. When you think about Department of Energy, we're not just a consumer of AI, we're a creator. We create the software, the hardware, the technologies, because the problems we face don't have other solutions. And so we're turning to it, and we're forced to develop kind of beyond what the market forces are doing. We're fundamentally a mission agency. We have things that we have to deliver on schedules, and things that have fairly tough requirements. We're responsible for keeping the lights on. It's the energy sector responsibility falls to us, and that's not just the grid, it's pipelines, it's everything. It's against all hazards, man-made or natural. We have cybersecurity network. We have networks, classified and unclassified, that we own. We have cybersecurity. We have to work on that. The volumes of data we typically talk about are in units that are called petabytes. A petabyte is like having a billion photos on your iPhone. And if you get that every day and you ask, well, what's in there? This is already beyond what humans can do. And as we face petabytes of data, and soon enough, 1,000 times more exabytes in the next couple of years, it's clear that traditional methods of dealing with data across the problems we have, beyond cyber, it's nuclear security, it's emergency preparedness and response, it's collections of problems. We're a part of the intelligence community, so we have intelligence functions, nuclear non-proliferation. They're collections of things with disparate data sources, different modalities, each with important questions that have to be answered, each increasingly inundated with data. Historically, DOE has turned to computers. We have pioneered large-scale computing since the Manhattan Project. Today, we have the #1 and #2 fastest computers in the world. They are enabled with graphical processing units, so they're smart in the sense that we can run remarkable scale AI on those. But they're a means to an end. The tools that we create, the one-of-the-kind systems, are based on the problems that we have, and identification of where we need to place our bets in the department to answer questions for events that we hope will never happen. And that's the thing, as opposed to the commercial market, where often you have lots of data and you can afford to be wrong. With your Google search engine, you're probably not feeling lucky every time and getting the first hit and that's your answer. You tolerate inaccuracies, and in AI today, the applications are fairly narrow, and you can tolerate noise in the system and repeated use to try and refine, whether it's Siri or Alexa or navigation or translation, and that's built in. But the kind of decisions the department has to make, you haven't instrumented them. They haven't happened before, and we worry about them. And with all the data we can gather, the question is, how do we think about that, and what do we do? So, we live in this space across a broad set of responsibilities where technologies are required that we just can't get off the shelf. And our secret weapon are 17 national laboratories where we can, 55,000 scientists, engineers, researchers that we turn to doing some of this with the private sector, academia, whoever can help.
Great, thank you very much. Mr. Bill Pratt, Department of Homeland Security. So I'm sure you've got a lot going on. Maybe you can share with us some of the use cases, some of the things that are going on in your organization.
Sure, thanks, Mike. And what a great panelist. Really glad to be here with them and with you. Hi, everybody. I'm going to jump off of something Margaret Weichert said earlier, because she fed me some great lines, and I was writing them down. So one of the big things she mentioned this morning is we need to redo the way we do IT acquisition in DHS. And I'm going to be a little IT focused, because I do work for the CIO and the CTO. But we took that challenge a couple of years ago. Deputy Undersecretary Chip Fulgham, he took 5 pilot programs and said, guys, throw out the rule book. I don't want red programs down the road anymore. I don't want these $1 million, $1 billion programs failing. So we undertook this effort for agile acquisition transformation. And we got those 5 pilots rocking, got them out the door, got contracts. They're putting out usable functionality every 6 months or less. It's wonderful. We also learned 18 different distinct things that we need to fix at DHS. We attacked those over the last couple of years. I'm proud to report that in April, we knocked out the last 2. And number 18 was data analytics. How do we use AI, RPA, machine learning, to do this stuff better? For instance, we read documents still. We're still pretty document-based. When someone comes out and does a system design, and we want to prove if that's a valid design, there's a human who will sit there and read that document and against a checklist if he's a newer person or she's a newer person. But eventually he'll read the document and say, yeah, that looks good, right? Well, if I can teach that guy or gal to do that, I can certainly teach a machine to do that. And when you take that, these documents could be in the hundreds, and they could be in the page count could be in the hundreds. So imagine, at least the first thing we want to do is just try to have a quick run at them and give me an initial risk score. If this one's a 99 against the checklist, that one's a 58, I'm going to spend my human time on that one, right? So we're using it to help us filter the work because there just aren't enough bodies. It doesn't make sense, as we've said earlier, for humans to do this anyway, right? But we don't have enough bodies to read all the documents that come through. And until such time that we come up with some better way of recording our engineering thoughts, documentation is what we have to review. As part of that, our job was to prove the viability of AI using action item 18. We're not fully in, it's not in place, not fully in operation. But the very interesting thing we found out about that is we tried to use text classification. So we actually had a very, very smart, Dr. Q, he's fabulous, a very, very smart engineer, using our own people because we do not have extra people, and this is something he's very good at. So he did this analytics model where he used a number of text classification categories, and what we found is that we eventually, I'll cut to the chase, we got a 44% match from the machine relative to what a human would have done. And we're like, wow, that's kind of disappointing, but not really. What we found out was the humans, we all have different filters. We all see things different ways. Very, very smart humans, many of them had different results from what they read and determined what the output should have been. So what we found is not only we got a little more work, and I think we ran about 500 use cases through. We probably needed a couple thousand because this was true machine learning. It was running through, and the thing was calculating, and through naive Bayes and all kinds of stuff. I'm not quite the guy to explain well. We got a pretty good result. But what we found out, which was more interesting, is that the humans did the very same thing. So between what it showed us is we have to fix our classification or our process better to get humans to do the job better, even if we never get to doing AI. Because there are obviously biases and assumptions we are building into our processes and procedures that we're not addressing yet.
Sure. So are individuals concerned about being replaced by AI? You're going down this path, right?
No.
And certainly, what is the view from the team?
I think initially some folks do have some reticence to it. On my team particularly, no. We are so small that, and all of throughout the CTO shop, and we are working on to try to get, because we can't get to all the work, frankly. And if we do look at all these documents, and that's just one aspect of what we do, we're really not taking time to study them, right? Mm-hmm. So it's, our ability to look at the really impactful, useful, human-based thought information is what we want to get to. And some of the other stuff that has to be done, as we mentioned earlier, a number of the things we must do are mandated by law or policy. And we manage that on behalf of the CIO. The federal IT dashboard, when you see that, that's the result of our work. Mm-hmm. But getting that done requires one analyst to do a bunch of manual things right now. That's the first thing we're tackling with our PA. We're going to put a bot in place very soon for that.
Great. Let me ask a more general question of the group, and maybe we'll start with you, Dr. Parker. Google recently published a set of principles around AI. Many of the techniques that are out there can be used, multi-use, dual use, and maybe some concerns about using some of these techniques in a not so positive way. So Google published these principles. Can you talk about the federal government? Do you think that we should have a set of principles across the federal government around the use of AI?
Yeah, certainly it's not just Google, of course. A number of industries have come up with principles like Amazon and Microsoft and IBM and Accenture and so forth. So these kinds of principles about what is the responsible use of AI is a common topic that we're discussing really internationally, because there are a lot of international conversations about this as well. Mm-hmm. And so one of the challenges, of course, is, well, whose principles are most relevant for all the cases? Now, internationally, just recently, within the last couple of weeks, we, the United States, signed on with 35 other countries from the OECD, Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, together with 6 non-member OECD countries, onto the AI principles. And so this is an international document about the responsible stewardship of AI. And so these principles are divided into 2 areas. One set of areas has to do with the kinds of characteristics that we all expect from AI. Things like it should be unbiased, and we should have some transparency in its use. It should be safe and secure and robust. We need to have some interpretability with it. Certainly there are issues of accountability with it. And then a second set are the actions that governments should take in order for us to ensure the responsible stewardship of AI. And that includes areas like focusing on R&D that's necessary. For instance, if you want to have AI that's interpretable, right now we don't have the ability to do that. And so it's because it's a technical challenge. So you need R&D in order to address some of these questions. Issues of fairness, for instance, also need more research in order for us to be able to have some verifiability behind the AI systems that they're doing and performing in the way that we expect. Other areas that the principles talk about for governments is in creating an ecosystem, a cyber infrastructure ecosystem that's amenable for AI, looking again at governance issues and so forth. Education and workforce issues are one of those areas as well, and in the area of what the impact is of AI on people's jobs. And so those are principles that we have been very happy to engage in the entire process, and we have signed on to those. And now what we're doing at the United States is really seeing how do we implement those at the federal level. Now, we already have an action, conveniently, in the executive order that calls for the Office of Information and Regulatory Affairs, OIRA, which is part of OMB, to create an AI memo that will look at regulatory and non-regulatory approaches for how the agencies will oversee the use cases of AI, particularly those agencies that have regulatory authorities. And so that's a process that we're undergoing now that should provide some consistency about how the agencies view AI use cases. It will also talk about our regulatory approach, which is to look at it in a risk-based approach. We look at not all AI is the same. Some AI use cases require more oversight. Other AI cases don't. And so we're going through that process now. And the timeline is that this June, we will have a draft of that OIRA memo, governance memo for AI, that will be out for public comment. And so we welcome everyone to provide feedback. And then that will be incorporated into the final document, which is required by the executive order to come out in August. And then after that, the agencies will have 6 months to create their plans in order to show their consistency with that memo. And so, for instance, DOT, having the great past history of work that they've been looking at as it relates to AI regulatory issues with the transportation area, has provided input, and others across the interagency are as well.
Okay, great, thank you. We're going to be a little close on time, so I wanted to ask a very quick question of everyone. Talk about the vision of AI in the federal government, let's say in the next 3 to 5 years. So, Bill, we'll start with you.
Well, for us, it means taking all the things that we do manually now and to the extent possible, converting those to AI. There's so many processes we follow in the government, so many forms filled out, so many things that can be initially done with RPA, and then we do a little more machine learning, tie those up, and make them a little smart, do some unattended RPA down the road. And I think it's doing the job we're doing now, but just doing it better and with more value through AI.
Thank you.
You know, it cuts across everything we do in our private lives, in government, and it's kind of the same. I mean, when you look at your inbox and your emails, I don't know how many unopened emails you have, how
200.
many thousands, or we're inundated with information across the board around us, and as IoT grows, as 5G, as the smart systems surround us both at work, at home, data is being generated and passing everywhere, and there's going to be an AI infrastructure that will just emerge. And as we think about government now, this is the right time. You know, we look at the places where the data is is the richest, where opportunities exist, and it's just about everywhere. And so we're trying to pick the right places to explore the right kind of returns on investment. But it's almost everywhere you point, and we're looking at that very broadly.
So buzzword time. For us, it's looking at enabling the technologies that can handle the dull, dirty, and dangerous work that is being done by humans today. And to get there, we have to make sure that we're enabling the technology so we can get the safety, the efficiency, and the economic benefit. And to do that, we have to make sure we're using policies and engagement on the front end so that people understand what the systems are, they can have trust in the systems, that their questions about the security of the systems, the safety of the systems, and their privacy can be answered. So when the rules are made, we've done all the work to address all of the problems so that people will feel comfortable getting in an AV or allowing a drone to fly over their house.
I'm extremely optimistic. I do think we now are at a time where we're looking at all the right things. We're looking at the R&D, we're looking at how we use AI in government, we're looking at how we oversee and govern AI, we're looking at education and workforce challenges. So I'm very confident that over the next several years we will be able to make good progress in all of these areas, and it will be a very positive outcome for America.
Great. Well, I'd like to thank the panel. Let's give them a warm applause. And Finch, I'm waiting for my autonomous car, so we're counting on you.